What's good, y'all, and welcome to another gear recommendation settings video. In this one, I shall be giving you the very best settings for 2025 based on the newest update containing essential attributes and how you can make best use of them. So you're going to get three different categories of settings, which is going to be a early slash mid game version, a late slash end game version, and then an end game version, which is, let's go a bit about the specifics. So early to mid game would be pretty much something from gear rate stage 10 to gear rate stage 18s. Late to end game would be pretty much from the stage 19s to stage 21s, as well as also starting to include gear dungeons. And then the end game is basically you finished everything in the content and you're just trying to perfect your gear. On top of that, I'm also going to be going over all the rules in the way we set them up in the late slash endgame version, how you can modify them to your preferences, and also a bit of the reasoning on how this whole rule system works. The only differences between these ones is it's basically going to be the same ground rules, just more and more strict depending on how far into the game you are. So for example, for the early game, we're pretty much just looking for crit rate, and then in the end game, we already need like crit rate, crit damage, and attack speed. So let's not really talk around or about it too long. We're going to start with the 3-piece sets. I'm going to go through all of them and explain to you the way it works, the way you can change it yourself, and the way it's going to be changed in your versions. So let's get straight into it. And also, obviously, if you want to, feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing, leaving a comment, helps getting this video out to more people. Overall, also supports the channel. And as usual, big thank you to all of you. All right, so here's the code. Two things. Number one, you can now see the names of the sets, so you don't have to go in blind. If you want to do a couple modifications to sets yourself, feel free to do so. You'll have the names of what is meant to be what. And then here for the codes, every one of you have the option to either type it in manually, which I don't recommend, but if you do, keep in mind the letter in between the red bars is a 0. So the first one goes MZA 0ODK equals, alright? I don't know why they gave me an O and a 0. It's the way the code works. Rather just copy the one if you're not interested. It's just pinned in the first comment, right? Pinned first comment, just copy the one you want, put it in, it's gonna work, everything's gonna be fine. Keep in mind, it is an O and a 0, so easy to get mixed up. Enjoy. Alright, so let's start with the very first setting, which is going to be the rage region setting. Let's go from top to bottom and go through it, explain how it works. So, the very first rage region rule is only going to be applicable to Wings of Grace, Morale, Invigoration, and Mana Spring, which are the only relevant sets you really want on rage region focused characters. And the primary attributes are going to be attack percent, HP percent, rage region, and attack speed. Attack percent, HP percent is for the bangle, depending on if you need more healing or if you need your unit a bit more tankier. Then you have attack speed, which is pretty much what you're going to be running on every single amulet, and then rage region, what you're going to be running on every single ring. And then next up, the way these primary attributes work is, for example, let's start with an HP percent primary attribute. If the HP percent is primary, then obviously it cannot be HP percent in the secondary. So even though HP percent is selected there twice, it's just pretty much as imagine it is only 4 of them. The other options are going to be then attack percent, rage region, attack speed, and healing effect. And for this piece to get a thumbs up, it needs to have 3 of those. Now the most important part about this is there's still a bit of RNG between the pieces, and that's where essential attributes come in. A piece can have, let's say for example, HP percent, and then rage region, healing effect, and attack bonus. This piece doesn't really sound useful, it really isn't, and that's where essential attributes come in, and that is a piece like this, even though it meets the primary attribute and it meets the secondary attribute, it is still not considered a thumbs up because it doesn't meet the essential attribute requirements, where every single piece needs to have at least attack speed and rage region in any combination. So for example, HP percent main set needs to have attack speed, rage region as the substats. Attack speed main set needs to only have rage region as a substat, and rage region only needs to have attack speed as a substat. Out of those, you're then going to get more and more useful pieces, and depending on how far you are in the game or how many of those pieces you've already collected, you can then, for example, say, oh, okay, I don't really need attack percent in my pieces. I am really looking for specifically gear like that is super useful for my healer, and then you could, for example, change it to required secondary attributes to 4, and then create a piece like this where, for example, the piece would need to, in theory, be attack speed with HP, HP flat, rage region, and healing effect. But we are going to keep it the way we had before, and yeah. So now that we have the rage region set through, we have the glacier set. Glacier set, if you get to the code, if you take the code, feel free to take out the glacier set, because overall the glacier set is a fun set. It has the ability to give you 6% of your max HP as attack, but let me be real with you here, it never really worked on anyone, because it always kind of ended up being worse. Like, for example, Jira was a big hope for the glacier set, and then he kind of came in with the Infernal Raw set still overtaking the Glacier set. Glacier set also may be somewhat useful on Abomination, but then Abomination also can just use Sorbonne Arcana, because Sorbonne Arcana can stack to 5 stacks anyway. But it is pretty much here, and the only thing that works is really, really basically perfect pieces. So what we're going to be looking at here is you have attack percent. Let's just take an example. So if a piece has HP percent main, that means HP percent falls out of this category here. But then it also needs 4 of the selected attributes, but before these even come into play, you have the essential attributes right here, in which this piece needs to have at least at minimum HP percent, then following by crit rate, crit damage, and attack speed. And then the 4th stat can either be attack flat, HP flat, rage region, or attack bonus, all of them pretty much coming in to basically the same degree. And all of these would be top tier glacier pieces, but the glacier set isn't really all that strong. So if you're not interested in glacier pieces, you can also just delete that role. I just wanted to include it because some of you might have complained that it wasn't there. Which brings us to tank sets for defense. Pretty simple. It needs to have at the minimum primary attribute defense percent, and then essential attributes defense percent, which just makes sense, because obviously it's the same as the primary attribute. And then you want attack speed and HP percent. Outside of attack speed and HP percent, you then also want 4 of the selected attributes, which means the piece would look something like defense percent, HP percent, attack speed, giving you 3, and then rage region and HP, or rage region and defense flat, or defense flat and HP flat. Basically, what we're doing here is taking out attack, crit rate, crit damage, healing effect, defense bonus, healing effect, and attack bonus as potential secondary substats, trying to help us refine this perfect tank gear. Set-wise, you can see the reason an invigoration is because there might be cases where you want your tank to be able to give a damage dealer more damage. Morale, if you want your tank on the field while still providing a 4% damage bonus to everybody. Slappiest because you can send it into invigoration, and then you have Tempered Will, Unshaken Will, and Guardian as the standard tank sets. Now, this is the same exact thing we already went over. The only difference is the fact that this time it is HP percent primary. Bringing us to healers. So for the healers here, we have Wings of Grace, Morale, Invigoration, and Asclepius. If you want to modify any of these plans, depending, so the main change between like the end game versions, the late game versions, and the early game versions is the amount of sets. You can see all these sets pretty much are only the ones that really do synergize with the intended substats, but especially early on, it could also be something like a Fatality set or a Glacier set and the like. So the way, again, this works, let's go for a simple example. You're going to get a piece with healing effect. Now, this piece with healing effect needs to at least meet the requirements of also having attack percent and attack speed, because it's in a healer set, and any piece that does have healing effect but isn't meeting the main stat or the attack speed requirement is just out automatically. Now, because you already have attack percent and attack speed in, the next stat on top of it is either going to be rage region or attack flat, and that's pretty much how you read it. So your piece is going to be a healing effect piece with at minimum attack percent, attack speed, and then healing effect obviously already in the main stat, and then the last subset is either going to be attack flat or rage region. If you're interested in it, you could obviously also introduce HP percent as a potential subset if you're of the opinion that your platform units aren't tanky enough. So that would be just us adding in HP percent as another potential role. And if you really just want to specify exactly the gear you want, the way you do this is you just add in a primary attribute. Let's create a rule where you can just specifically search for pieces. So let's say Infernal Custom, right? We call it the Infernal Custom. It's Infernal Raw, and we are just looking for attack percent as the main stat, and then crit rate, crit damage, attack speed, and let's say rage region. Then we select required secondary subsets 4, and then essential attributes, we can select all of them. Or better said, we can select all of these, right? And then this is going to give you a piece that has to meet the primary attribute requirement of attack percent, as well as having rage region, crit rate, crit damage, and attack speed. So if you were to specifically look for certain pieces, this is how you can create a custom rule. So yeah, let's get rid of that Infernal Custom again, and then continue down the line. I'll obviously try to speed up a bit so we can get through this a bit faster. So we have HP Healer, exactly the same specifics that you had for the attack-based one, just with the inclusion of obviously HP and then HP flat, again with the same pretty much requirements. Now we're getting to Inspiration. Wings of Grace, Morale, Invigoration, and Slap Pierce, all the sets you would see on an Inspiration Healer, though most of the time Morale isn't really in there, but it's just there because at the moment it's a tier 3 set and you never know, they might even buff it, making it a viable option for an Inspiration unit, though it is rather unlikely considering the fact that Inspiration units also benefit from a Wings of Grace set giving them attack percent, but I just put it there just in case to kind of future proof. So this is again readable very easily. So it has to have attack percent as well as attack rate, attack speed, rage region after it meets all these 4 categories, because this is kind of the way Inspiration gear has evolved at the moment, with Diao needing attack speed, with Beelzebub needing attack speed, with Constance needing attack speed, and all that stuff, leading to then a piece like this. And then next up, what we've done is basically eliminate the pretty much unwanted substats, like for example crit rate, crit damage, defense percent, and defense flat are all substats that if they roll next to these essential attributes aren't going to get a thumbs up in this selection to really try to create, you could say, the perfect pieces. Next up, we come to, I guess, one of the most important rules, and that has to be the DPS main rule. And the way it works is we have the main DPS sets, Cataclysm, Health Cement mostly, so you're kind of future-proofing for them buffing it, which is still possible after the latest buff, already showing that this is something the developers are looking forward or looking to. And then also we have Ageless Wrath. It's not really used anymore, but there might be a time when they, for example, buff it, or you might not be at the point where you can just use Infernal Raw, Sovereign Arcana, Cataclysm for everything and might still be looking for Ageless Wrath pieces. So, once again, let's go through a quick example. Let's take attack percent. If attack percent is the primary attribute, it also needs to have crit rate, crit damage, attack speed. And then to meet the secondary requirement, it needs to either have attack flat, HP flat, rage region, as the substats, us pretty much eliminating defense, HP, defense percent, and healing effect as potential substats. Next up, we have the HP DPS. It's pretty much the same thing, just ensuring that you have like the perfect HP DPS pieces for example, someone like a Magda, Malvira. Defense, same thing, basically just ensuring your ability to have the perfect defense pieces in case the game ever releases a defense-based unit that just obviously scales off of defense. One thing you can do, depending on how far you are into the game, is just put in more required selected attributes, and or also just take out a couple essential attributes if you just want a bit more breathing room. And in general, even with these rules, I would recommend all of you to just lock ancient pieces. Just lock ancient pieces. They might become useful in the future anyway. But let's move on to the 2-piece and be ready with it. Now, second-rate gear, the way it's called second-rate gear is because it is offensive-based gear, so Wicked Vengeance, Warlord, Calamity, Annihilating Might. If you're earlier in the game, obviously, also it's going to include Whirlwind, but Whirlwind really isn't popular at the high end. And the reason why it's second-rate gear is because this combination leads to you thumbing up gear that is missing attack percent. Now, pieces like this would be, for example, an attack percent or missing like the D-Perfect. The D-Perfect gear is obviously attack percent, crit rate, crit damage. And then now with the Forge on top of it, it would be attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed. but still there's pieces that you might need for certain bits, like let's say attack percent, crit rate, attack speed. You can't always get the very tippity top of the gear, so that's where this second rate rule kind of comes in. If you're already at the point of having these pieces that I'm going to name, then you can also just delete the rule. So the second rate rule includes pieces like crit rate, crit damage, attack speed, attack percent, crit rate, attack speed, or attack percent, crit rate, attack speed, rage region, or attack percent, crit rate, rage region. Just pieces that are good, but that aren't like the tippity top, which is why they're not included in the rule you're going to see in a bit. Now we have HP DPS. Once again, it's pretty much the primary sets with Astral Guardian, Wicked Vengeance, Immortal Warrior, Life Force. Though to be fair, I guess we could also include Annihilating. Nah, Annihilating Might is not really good. I mean, no, let's keep out Annihilating Might. So again, the way this here works, it needs to have at minimum HP percent, crit rate, crit damage, and then it also needs to have HP percent, rage region, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed. So the reason why there isn't, for example, a combination like essential attributes being like HP percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed is because a piece like this, HP percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed, is either completely impossible to find or just able to be found in the Forge. And that has to do with, again, once more, what was before we got to this whole Forge 4-star madness, the golden rule of gearing, and that was it was impossible for you to get a crit damage roll on a non-ancient weapon the same way it was impossible to get an attack speed roll on a non-ancient chest piece, leading to us having to kind of like gear around these requirements. And also before the introduction of the Forge, a piece with more than 3 offensive substats just wasn't a thing. The same way it wasn't quite true for armor, because armor always had this 4-stat potential in attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack flat, or potentially rage region, but what never really was seen before was this whole attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed. Also, on the note of the Forge, the biggest problem with the Forge currently is you're not going to be able to thumbs up exclusive gear. Exclusive gear is already thumbs up if it meets the requirement, if it doesn't meet the requirements. So even with these settings, you're not going to get around checking out your Forge pieces. So if you Forge, if you get a piece, even if it has a thumbs up, it might be a constant chest plate that has attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, and rage region, which obviously doesn't make sense. Not only is it a non-offensive set, but it also doesn't work for constants. So keep out your eyes. The Forge thumbs up isn't actually implemented at the moment. Now we have defense DPS. It is basically the same rule we had before, followed by healer HP. Again, here as an example, it needs to have at minimum HP percent healing effect, attack speed, otherwise it's not even going to get considered. And then preferably it also needs to introduce something like rage region or HP flat on top of that before it's actually considered a thumbs up piece. Now healer attack is pretty much the same thing, just with attack. Rage region left side gear is, simply speaking, just gear that has at minimum attack speed and rage region. And then also out of those, you can make it more specific if you're looking for example, HP percent or attack percent as like mandatory stats on your gear, where you then, for example, would set it to required number of substats 3. Meaning that all of those are also required, either HP or attack, or it's not going to get considered a piece at all. Here, simply speaking, it's just tank gear. The way it works, it needs to have a minimum defense percent, HP percent, and attack speed. The reason for attack speed is attack speed means your unit hit enemies. If they hit enemies, they restore rage. If they restore rage, they can use their ultimate more, and that's pretty much the only thing you need on a tank. Obviously, this is more of like an end game variant. If you're looking for early game tank gear, you really just want defense percent, HP percent, and you're basically good. And then here we have the DPS left side gear, the, you could say, cream of the crop, with minimum attack percent, crit rate, crit damage on any piece that wants to be considered a good one, and then also with the 4-stat requirement addition, where a piece needs to meet attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, but also either have attack flat, HP percent, rage region, or attack speed as additional stats. And the reason for that is attack HP percent has become a bit more important with us seeing more and more content where there's more and more damage specifically for platform units. So even though attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, attack speed might be the most efficient piece. If your unit dies, a piece with attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, and HP percent is vastly superior. So this concludes all the gear settings and how you can read them, how you can modify them to your own taste. As usual, we also already have the codes down in the comments below, and we see each other in the next one. Peace!